Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Crítica.NYC. I am your host, Raquel Batista, and this is a show about the work, life, and politics of the Latinx community in New York City and the United States. Today, we're happy that Lucia Gomez, our co-host, has returned to join us today to discuss many things that are on our plate. Aquí estamos, nosotros seguimos, with a bunch of things happening within our communities. Everything from addressing issues of redistricting, the upcoming elections, mass shootings, as many of you know, that have occurred, and we'll discuss later on more during the show. But right now, I just wanted to quickly recognize the work that Crítica.NYC has been doing now over the last 2 years already. And we are so excited because Crítica.NYC won a hometown award for our work on voter education. And I want to particularly give a shout out to Lucia Gomez, who hosted this particular show. And we're going to just show you a brief reel on the show that won the award.
So why don't we zoom this back out, right? Like, what is redistricting?
All redistricting is it's rejiggering the election lines every 10 years so that each election district is kind of similar in size and keeps communities together. There are 435 seats in Congress. And so those are divided between all of the states. And so what happens is every 10 years, you have to kind of reapportion where people have moved to. So when you see things in the news like, I know California lost a seat, I think Florida picked up a seat, that's readjusting to make sure that my vote here counts the same as your vote in Florida.
Literally, there are both shenanigans that happen as a result of gerrymandering and the right or the purpose or the intention for folks to dictate the outcome of a race. Call your local representative, ask them, I really want to know what you're thinking about this redistricting process.
Again, thank you, Hometown Awards, for this wonderful honor. Now Crítica.NYC, and it's an awards-winning show. I want to thank our whole team that's been doing a ton of work, especially our executive producer, Zenaida Mendez, Freddie Pinto, Carla Robles, and all the wonderful people at the Manhattan Neighborhood Network for making this a possibility. And here we are with Lucia. Hi, Lucia.
Hi, how are you? I have to laugh because I see the smirk that I put on the face. And as I was watching the show, my smirk was the same. I was like,
Well, redistricting is your topic over the last really 2 years, right? Working from everything from the federal level to what's happening locally. So I'll just, turn it over to you now. So, you can talk to us about where we are right now in this whole process. So much has happened with the congressional and the state lines, within the courts. People are now starting to talk about the New York City redistricting. So I'll just hand it over to you so you can tell us more about what's happening and its impact on Latinos in New York City.
Yes, thank you, Raquel. I mean, as you know, a lot has happened since that show that we had with Michelle Lamberti of Latino Justice and the Unity Coalition. And the reality is that since that show, we were able to do many more education events and webinars and opportunities for the community to ask questions. There were hearings by the New York State Redistricting Independent, what they would call the Independent Redistricting Commission, who ended up failing at their task of producing maps for the state. And so as a result, the legislature, the state legislature drew their own maps, both for the Senate, for the Assembly, and for the congressional districts. And once they approved their plans, once they drew them, they immediately approved them, and the governor immediately signed them Well, plaintiffs from Steuben County, or more like plaintiffs from the state of New York in Steuben County courthouse, decided to file, and it was Republican plaintiffs, decided to immediately sue the state of New York for what they considered to be unconstitutional lines that violated the New York State Constitution. And, lo and behold, the courts agreed in many iterations. They went through a couple of weeks of process, and the courts agreed. And once the courts agreed, we got a special master that was appointed by the judge in Steuben County, the lower court judge that had already ruled these lines unconstitutional, and forced the special master to draw only congressional and state Senate lines. So where we are right now is that we have new lines for congressional and state Senate. New lines meaning after the legislature passed and signed their laws, and people started doing petitioning and all that happened. They were ruled unconstitutional. We have brand new lines. The public was only given one shot to really testify in person, and then given another opportunity in writing. And there was a lot of back and forth, and we can have a conversation of what all that meant. But right now, what ends up happening is that as a result of this lawsuit and the results of the lawsuit, we have 2 elections for primaries in the state of New York. We have to make sure to highlight that, right? June 28th, folks will show up to the polls and vote for judicial delegates, but governor, lieutenant governor, the state assembly, right? So you will not vote for your congressional reps or your state Senate reps. Those will take place on August 23rd. So now we have 2 separate primaries, which June 28th will only be, and as you can see on screen, governor, lieutenant governor, state assembly, and I believe there's some additional party and judicial delegates and that kind of thing. And then August 23rd, the U.S. House, right, our congressional folks, and the state Senate. And there are some significant changes. The state assembly maps, while they were not thrown out, there was multiple suits trying to make sure that the state assembly was also included. They were not. So the lines passed by the legislature are, in fact, the lines that we'll see on June 28th. And the lines August 23rd are the new lines drawn by the state legislature. Not drawn by the state legislature, drawn by the special master. So it's kind of important to see a little bit of that. And Raquel, I will take your cue if there's anything specifically that you notice that's of change. But I want folks to be able to have a chance to take a look at where they can find these lines. The CUNY mapping service did an amazing job at actually compiling all the proposals. And so I'm actually going to share that with everyone.
So Lucia, before you share quickly, one thing that I do know, right, particularly for the state Senate lines right now, because there has been so many changes, it really is going to impact those races. Right now, there are people who are elected who lost their district, and so they're trying to figure out where they're going to be running. There are people who have been petitioning for seats that were open that now are really technically no longer open. So this really has a huge impact on this campaign season and this election season.
Absolutely. So if I go through, and I'm going to start with congressional, and if there's any area that you think, we should make sure to highlight, I'll talk a little bit about what's happening both in the changes of the lines as well as any particular instances, particularly in the state Senate and possibly in Congress. So we'll talk about the changes there. Well, actually in Congress, and we can kind of take a look at what those instances actually are. So can you see the screen? Let's see. Okay. Can you see the map screen?
No. Oh, it's coming up now. There we go. It's there.
Okay. Wonderful. So let's look at first of all, this is the New York.redistricting and news site, okay, that .org that was created by CUNY Mapping Services and Steve Romoleski's team over at CUNY. And it gives us a chance to take a look at, and if you notice, it says Congress Plan Special Master Final. That's the final plan. That's the one that we will see on August 23rd, the candidates all running towards. But if you zoom over to the left, right, you move the cursor, you see what the old lines look like. So if we're looking at District 15, and I hope, we can see this part, the data on the left, when I scroll over to the left, it says the population data for the 2020 census based on the old lines. And then when I move the cursor, and on the right, you see the data based on the brand new lines for the special master. So when I move it over, people can see, hopefully, the differences. The black lines are the old seats, and the purple coming in are the new lines for that district. You noticed, and for the Latino community, this is pretty much a huge deal, right? You're talking about a district that originally was centered in the South Bronx, taking in Soundview, Hunts Point, right? South Bronx, Yankee Stadium, up the concourse, left and right, Morsania. And now when you scroll over, you no longer see Hunts Point in that seat, right? Or Soundview. And what you're looking at is a district in the South Bronx that now removes the whole area of Soundview and Hunts Point, and now goes straight up through Morrisania, no longer takes in University, any part over here, but now goes all the way up into Eastchester and across into Riverdale. And if we look at the district again into the northern boundary, this is brand new territory, a lot of new territory for current sitting Congressman Richie Torres, and a huge difference in terms of new electorate for those residents in District 15 that for decades have enjoyed a district where Congressman Serrano really represented the South Bronx in an interesting way because of how compact. Interestingly enough, Congressman Richie Torres was up in Steuben County testifying, hoping that the special master would, in fact, allow the district of the South Bronx to remain the same. For a lot of reasons, that was impossible. Those of us that were drawing maps knew that was impossible. If folks ever want to take a look at some of the proposals that were submitted, you have a bunch of versions of different maps and the special masters submitted map. But aside from those are the ones that the state legislature originally had adopted and were in fact unconstitutional. And so you see a lot of the different plans submitted. I think this is an amazing compilation. The ones that were ruled unconstitutional by the courts say it really clearly, ruled unconstitutional by the courts.
This is, first of all, I think, mad props to CUNY for putting this together, because both me and you, we've been through this redistricting process for 3 decades now. And to see it this way, I mean, it just really is incredible. That's one. 2, historically, right, the district that Congressman Serrano represented, that now Richie Torres represents, has been one of the poorest districts in the country for years. And so for it to change like this, I currently live in Riverdale. Riverdale is, more of a more upper working class sort of community. So, that will absolutely change, the sort of issues that are going to be addressed there. But then also the interesting thing is those areas of Hunts Point, and those areas are now going to be represented by AOC, by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was recently in Puerto Rico, and that's a whole other conversation. But, and we had a show about what's happening with Puerto Rico and the status last time. This is really just going to make things really interesting for New York City.
I mean, Raquel, you kind of, a big deal. This is a huge deal for Bronxites in particular. I find it fascinating that, with the win in 2018 of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in District 14, she has now gathered and gained more of the South Bronx in particular. I think, interestingly enough, I absolutely do think that it's a welcoming thing for her, right, to have a base like in the South Bronx. Interestingly enough, Congressman Serrano was very much left in his politics. Not sure if he ever got a chance to really show the world. He was probably very
And
left.
he brought Castro to the Bronx.
That's right. That's right. And I think people forget this, right?
Yeah, no, I remember that moment vividly. He brought him to Jimmy's Bronx Cafe when it was on 207th and Fordham Road.
And his district was that different, right? I mean, I do think that folks think AOC was the first iteration of how left we were. I mean, but I think Congressman Serrano and his politics were very much aligned with this part of the Bronx. And now that AOC has gathered some of that, I'm not sure if there was I think definitely the special master did not take. I don't think he saw those things.
No, I don't think so either. But I think it is welcoming, especially because one of my biggest complaints or criticisms is, we definitely need a little bit more excitement, I think, in our politics in the Bronx. And so many exciting things I see happening, like in Queens, in the areas that she was representing, in Jackson Heights and Corona and those areas. We need that here. And so I think it's, while we'll see how this actually plays out with Riverdale, I think this would be really exciting for the South Bronx.
Definitely. I will note that in the district of Richie's new seat, we do see on the left-hand side a change in the demographics, right? We are looking at a district that was 64.1% Latino voting age, meaning over the age of 18. And now the district has dropped significantly to 53.5% voting age. I think in another, there are analysis, like in another moment in time when the Voting Rights Act still had a Section 5, a process of pre-clearance, a process where any changes that the state of New York made in these three counties, Bronx, New York, and Brooklyn, would have needed to have gone pre-clearance through the Department of Justice. I think we're looking at a clear comparison of a district now that 10 years ago, this wouldn't have happened. 20 years ago, this significant drop is a huge deal. While at the same time, you see the increase of white population, and that very much is covered by, the increase over into Riverdale, where there was a 2.7 voting age population of white. Now it's 10.3, right?
So is there a call to reinstate Section 5 for New York State? So now that we've seen that what has happened when we're not in it?
Yes. So I would say, I'm not sure if there's a call on Section 5, but I do know that most recently, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, one of the strongest Voting Rights Act protections by state, was just passed in the state Senate and the state assembly, that does require the Attorney General, in this case, Tish James, to pre-clear any voting changes. And in this instance, this would have been one of those instances. Unfortunately, because this was drawn by a special master, I'm not sure how that would play out in terms of state law, because it was drawn by, considering there were violations to state law, not necessarily the Federal Voting Rights Act. Because there are questions, I would say, and we haven't, I'll be honest, like in conversations with some voting rights folks, haven't raised this particular issue because it's still over 50% Latino in terms of whether or not we would have any kind of claim as to why the significant drop in Latino populations. But the other thing is, we're going to live in this district for 10 years in this drawing, right? And so Congressman Torres, how he was elected, who elected him, we'll see the impact of this and may have an opportunity to challenge in the future if we see that this negatively impacts the ability for Latinos to elect their candidates of choice, right? So,
look, I think, like, from my perspective, I'm a resident I live in Riverdale. I've been involved in a little bit of the politics here locally. And there are more and more Latinos moving into Riverdale. Many of them come from communities from like other parts of the Bronx who quote unquote move up to Riverdale. And so I think we'll very much grow into this district. I see it as that potential. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we do see an increase as well in AOC's district, where she was 46.6%. You know, they drew her up to 49.2%. Obviously, right, the density in this area alone of Hunts Point and Sound will get her to those numbers. She had a decrease in white population. She was originally 22.6 and dropped down to 19.6. And then she also has Co-op City. Big deal, big, voter electoral group of folks. It went from 8.6 Black to now having an electorate of 16.1 Black in the areas of Co-op City. So all around, there was some significant changes in the Bronx districts. I would say the one with the least changes on the Latino end definitely was Congressional District 13, where, starts in East Harlem. And one of the changes that did take place that's brand new would be the fact that, he now goes into the Columbia area more in the South, in the portion of beyond 110th Street. So now he goes further south. They only had a portion here that went into the Manhattan Valley. Manhattan Valley. Now he goes more south into the areas of Morningside Heights and the Columbia area. And, other than that, not huge, significant, shocker here, but, his district, they removed Norwood in order to give it to Richie Torres, and then go south into University Heights, which, throughout the entire process, we heard testimony of how important it was to have the congressman, if he were to move anywhere, to move further into the Bronx in areas that are currently, have seen density of the Dominican community kind of move from Inwood and Washington Heights into these portions of the Bronx. So that one, I would say, was the least shocker in terms of changes. Now, I am not going to ignore this one because it is a big, significant one. Upper West Side and Upper East Side, while it does not necessarily impact a lot of Latinos, it will impact the political landscape, right? Where Congressional District 12, which is the original Congresswoman Maloney seat, and this is a majority white seat all around, we're looking at 66% white. Did see a decrease in Latinos, but that's not the biggest thing. The biggest thing is the uniting of Upper West Side with the Upper East Side, all in Manhattan, which both sides saw a huge census increase in numbers. And now we're seeing two sitting Democratic incumbents that have solidly represented their separate districts. No one can refute that. Congressman Nadler and Congresswoman Maloney, and we're going to see a heated race in the next couple of weeks leading up to the August 23rd primary. That change, as a result, impacted the district, which is now called District 10, which was the old Nadler number of Congress 10, and has now created a district where it will take a lot of progressive communities of, Chinatown, Lower East Side, Battery Park City, going straight into Red Hook and parts of Brooklyn, uniting Sunset Park and impacting Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez's old seat, District 7. And so just some highlights from District 10. When we zoom in, and I want to be able to show this a little bit so folks can see the legend over, right next to the date on the left-hand side, there's a legend tab. But this gives a chance for voters for folks to see the race and national and the race and ethnicity data that comes with the redistricting file, so that communities are able to be kept together. And it's not just a race-based method of drawing. It is a reality that communities are segregated by housing, by job opportunities, right, by commercial strips. And so our communities live along these lines, and they are segregated in that way. So you have Lower East Side over here, exemplified by the green Latino population that lives still in parts of the Lower East Side, and then the Asian community in Chinatown, and then what we see over here in terms of Battery Park City, the financial district, and Tribeca. It goes up to about 14th Street, going jagged in and out to about 18th Street. And then it goes into Dumbo and takes in, it even takes Barclay Center, right? Cobble Hill, Red Hook, Gowanus, Park Slope, Prospect Heights, South Slope, Sunset Park, Borough Park, parts of Bay Ridge. And, this does a huge, definitely does a big thing here, where the biggest impact is really on District 7. And if we look at what those lines looked like before, this is District 7, right? Where the majority of the community that was taken from Red Hook and Sunset Park are now in District 10. But District 10 was just all the way from the Upper West Side, all the way into the south portion of Brooklyn, taking in Borough Park, right? And we saw it go all the way down to Bensonhurst. The Asian community there was split in a few ways. I definitely think that the Asian community there is now in 2 different districts, potentially, a few more, but less split than it was. And then uniting it all at one probably would have been difficult, although the version that was seen as unconstitutional under District 11 attempted to put Sunset Park, the Latino portion of Sunset Park in with District 11 in Staten Island. People complained about that, and that as a result definitely modified, right? So then
I could see why people would really complain about that, because that's a community of interest. I think that would lose a lot if they were with Staten Island, that traditionally has had Republicans representing.
Well, and I think a lot of folks were not happy with that. People assumed that was going to stay that way. They used Sunset Park as an entry point to get to Park Slope. And communities did feel like it wasn't intentionally done to be helpful to Sunset Park, but intentionally done to hurt Malliotakis and the chances for Republicans to maintain that seat, but in fact, provide an opportunity for a Democrat to win. Nevertheless, that did not happen. And, District 11, and listen, that has a lot of implications nationally as well as in the state of New York, right?
District 10 is going to see a big race now, because technically it's an open seat now, and there's already about 3 or 4 candidates that have announced that they're planning on running.
I mean, if 3 or 4, I can foresee a couple more. I mean, I think that the timeline is shortening up, but we do see one Latina in particular, Councilwoman Carlina Rivera from the Lower East Side. Her District 2 in the council is, I believe, wholly contained within the new District 10, about 160 some odd thousand people. So almost, 170 about, I think. So anyway, so her district is now wholly contained within the seat. You also have Alexa Aviles, whose, Sunset Park district is contained within District 10 as well.
Is she considering running as well?
No, she is not considering running, but I'm mentioning the Latino kind of connection there.
Sure.
I do think it would be an interesting race where the Latino community can be, galvanized and approach. Definitely, though, we're still only seeing an 18.4% voting age population of the Latino community. 10. And so, I always say that we don't punch at our weight class, but, we could make a difference if there's multiple candidates running and maybe provide an opportunity for, the Latino candidate choice to be the candidate. Not to say it would be Carlina, but definitely we've seen in the past where a Latino name can sway enough of the Latino electorate, especially ones that has name recognition in the district, right? That leaves us to go to the final piece on the congressional ends, and I know that I ran, a lot on this, but Congressional District 7, this district, took the biggest blow, I think, in terms of how different the district is. It does take parts of Sunnyside, Woodside that it didn't have before. It takes in all of Greenpoint that was not originally part of the district. So if you look at, this is the old district, and I'll zoom it out. One of the weirdest for sure, but very much created to elect a Latina 30 years ago. It was challenged, and the Asian community was kept from the Asian community in Chinatown and Sunset Park was one of the legal arguments that allowed that district to stay intact, ironically enough, not the Latino argument. But now that we're seeing this district, there was not necessarily a huge drop in Latino numbers because they were able to pick up those numbers while going into Sunnyside, but also by taking in more population in the areas of Woodhaven, okay? So, by providing some additional dense population over here and taking in, more diversity over here, we're looking at 37.1 originally in its original configuration, the 2020 data, and dropping down to 34.1. So 3 percentage points, but still keeping the Latino community of Williamsburg and Bushwick together, alongside with Ridgewood, parts of Woodhaven, and then now entering into parts of Sunnyside. Whether or not it creates a risk for our existing Congresswoman, that's yet to be seen. I don't believe there's anyone challenging her right now. There may be someone in the future, but definitely puts, a different twist on what this district could look like 10 years from now, with gentrification happening in Williamsburg and Bushwick. There are a lot of things that I believe were at stake here. But definitely, we combining that, population in District 10, yielded some kind of positivity for the Latino community by keeping them out of District 11 in Staten Island, and essentially having their votes, diluted by conservative majorities in the seats.
I mean, and just to revisit, for folks who are like watching and just kind of like trying to catch up with all of this is happening not only because it's a redistricting year, but also because New York State lost seats, right? So
we lost one seat.
We lost one seat. So this also means, right, because of all of these changes, that this will also change the political landscape for the state, right? In terms of who stays and who goes.
Correct. And the reality is that though that population loss did not happen downstate, but because it happened upstate, there are trickle effects, right? And so we are seeing that there was a mandatory need to make changes just for population equity purposes, but ultimately because of the loss of one congressional seat, because other parts of the country grew, right? I want to quickly go into state Senate, because I just want to highlight, I'm always going to start off in the Bronx because, as you know, this is the borough with the largest Latino population, over 50 some odd percent Latinos, has been for a very long time. But in this instance, we are seeing some huge changes, I feel like. For one, let's start Upper Manhattan into the Bronx. This for a long time, for the last 10 years, the way in which the state Senate drew it the last time was wholly contained, and I'll move this to the left, was wholly contained in Manhattan, going all the way down to about 23rd Street, maybe a little bit more into Chelsea, but along in the west side of Manhattan, and taking in Washington Heights, Morningside Heights, as well as Hamilton Heights, Washington Heights, and Inwood. But now the district significantly changed. And by the way, it went from 49.3% Latino to now going to 65.3 Latino.
Wow. Now, and so this first major change happened, when was it? Like for 2010? I remember when the district first went up into the Bronx.
Well, 2000, the district first went up.
It was in 2000. Okay.
It was in 2000 when Washington Heights was split in three. It was Olga Mendez, and I kind of recall a couple of conversations with Zenaida Mendez about that.
That's right.
Olga Mendez in East Harlem, David Patterson, our Governor Patterson, who was the state senator at that time, and Eric Schneiderman. And in 2001, with the redistricting process, they united all of Upper Manhattan into one district, and it was with the Eric Schneiderman district, and went up to Riverdale. That lasted the first decade, and then in 2012, the Republicans decided to further create havoc in that seat, and Schneiderman no longer ran, but our current Congressman Espaillat won that seat, with the support of then Eric Schneiderman, who became the Attorney General. And so, that seat up until 2016, where, Espaillat ran for Congress, and then Marisol Alcantara won the seat in 2016, and was able to maintain it till 2018. And then, a lot of things happened in 2018 where
the IDC debacle.
That's right. And so that district was very much saw, and I would say very much saw the white population that was in the original seat, which had about 32.5% of voting age population white, vote with progressives to oust then Senator Marisol Alcántara, and we've had Robert Jackson in that seat. Interestingly enough, the legislature decided to draw that seat with about 2 percentage points less to kind of protect Robert Jackson in his seat and not take him into the Bronx. The special master did hear our pleas to get Senate District 31 into parts of the Northwest Bronx in collaboration with the Unity Coalition, Latino Justice, Asian American Legal Defense Fund, and the Center for Law and Social Justice. And this district coincides pretty greatly with the lines of Congressman Espaillat, where, the population trends along University Heights and Kingsbridge and that part of the Northwest Bronx now brings Senate District 31 to be a very competitive seat for a Latino, of which we currently have, a Latino running who was originally running under the old lines, right? Trying to be able to bring that voice, a Dominican running Angel Vasquez, who happened to also be the chief of staff to Marisol Alcántara when she was senator. He's also on the political team of the United Federation of Teachers, a great, he's just a great guy. He's a good person, just as on an individual level, I would say. And he decided to run against Robert Jackson. Now he's still running against Robert Jackson, but with a much more favorable seat at a 65.3 voting age population. The issue here is that it does bring in a contentious issue where existing Senator Gustavo Rivera will no longer seek to represent this portion of the Bronx, considering it is a new Senate District 31, and he will now run in Senate District 33, which has many of the original parts of the district he represented when he was elected in 2010, when he ran against Pedro Espada. And that district now, Senate District 33, and if folks see what District 33 looked like before this one, now that's been split in three, really. Part of it is in District 31, the other part is in District 33, and then another portion of it is in District 32. And District 33 now runs into Riverdale.
And this is one of those districts where, right, Riverdale had become an open seat. A lot of the people who were running because Biaggi was no longer running for that seat, which was Senate District 34. But now under the special master, it has now become this new district with Senator Gustavo Rivera in the seat.
Right, and Senator Gustavo Rivera choosing to run in Senate District 33 instead of where, he was representing in parts of the Bronx in Senate District 31. Choosing to run here does create a situation with the candidates that were running because of its old configuration, which looked pretty similar to the old Biaggi seat, which ran from Riverdale through the center of the Bronx, picking up Morris Park, Pelham, and all of, and that portion in Westchester, picking up more Westchester. This time around, that district no longer goes across. And to be honest, I call that a white gerrymander originally, because it just took all the white populations of Riverdale with all the white populations of Morris Park, all populations over in the area of Throgs, and that portion
by the Trump golf course.
Yes,
and who vote Republican too.
Yeah, and so what it does, the special master drew this seat now to include just eastern portions of the Bronx versus cutting across and just doing a number on those populations. It still goes into Westchester, taking in parts of New Rochelle. I believe there's a New Rochelle candidate, but there is also Assemblywoman Natalia Fernandez has chosen to run in Senate District 34. So, we'll see potentially a new senator, a Latina from District 34, which basically broke up this gerrymander of a white seat. And let me just show what that looked like, right? Highlighted in black. Look at that. that was a weird configuration there, to say the least. But it was absolutely done in order to protect then Senator Jeff Klein, who was a member of the IDC. I'm actually really happy the special master took a scissor and redid that configuration. Nevertheless, you have what they called an open seat, which is where Senator Luis Sepúlveda is currently running in District 32. And I would say finally District 29, which is Marco Serrano, it removes him from the Upper West Side, which, his old configuration had, just weird lines going across, kind of broke into East Harlem. But his district is now much more in the Bronx and tightly configured in East Harlem.
And he had Roosevelt Island too. Where is Roosevelt Island going?
It is now in the new, if I'm correct, let's see, no, it's in the Senate District 28 with Liz Kruger. So it's in District 28, Roosevelt Island. Then you have a brand new open seat, which is interesting because originally we saw District 17 that the legislature was talking about, exactly what you were saying before about candidates running in the area of Riverdale. Well, now, we have Kristen Gonzalez, which is not really a Latino seat, and very much less now. But District 59 takes in Long Island City, takes in Queensbridge, parts of Astoria, parts of Brooklyn in terms of Greenpoint, and creates I believe it also has Stuytown in Manhattan, and creates a district where she's running, she's a DSA endorsed candidate, Kristen Gonzalez. And, you also have, I believe, ex-councilwoman Elizabeth Crowley also running in State Senate District 59. They were both going to see a race against one another in the old configured District 17, but still very interesting to see a Latina running in a district that isn't majority Latino, but it's not the first time. We've seen that happen before. And, we could see an interesting win here if she's able to gather that.
Interesting. So I know you have like 3 more minutes with us.
Yeah.
You have to go at 6:45. But, what else do you want to make sure that we know, especially for the Latino community, coming up? There's all these changes. We have a primary for this June 28th, which we will continue announcing and making sure that people come out and vote on June 28th. What else you'd like to make sure that folks know?
I mean, I think, aside from the fact that there are bifurcated elections, right? One June 28th and one August 23rd, that folks recognize that the testimonies that we're taking into account, right? The voices of people who testified during the redistricting process, up until the final minute with the special master, we were able to see some changes than to what his initial plan was. And I say that only to stress that the New York City redistricting process is currently underway, right? The city of New York saw over 800,000 new individuals move into the city or just grow in the last decade. And so the New York City council lines will each grow by about 20,000 more people than they were 10 years ago. That being said, there's going to be some changes in the New York City Council. Inevitably, there's no loss of council seats. We still have 51, right? But this is going to go very fast. And so if folks, thought they had gripes during the congressional, state Senate, and assembly process, if you don't get involved and you don't have your voices heard, you may have some more gripes come next year, because we will have a 2023 New York City Council election. And we will see some significant changes. I believe the first set of maps will be issued sometime in July. We will see, hearings happening in the next 2 to 3 weeks. They have not announced the schedule for those opportunities to, say where you would like the lines to go. But we are going to see a couple of hearings in the last week of June towards the first week of July. And so I do recommend folks to reach out, right, to get involved through Crítica.NYC, and let us know, what your concerns are, and even just getting educated, right, Raquel? At some point, we'll have a redistricting New York City version of this process that we just laid out for the state.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thank you for that, Lucy. I think the other thing that, we should mention right, is while we're talking about the lines and redistricting in terms of other issues when it comes to elections, there's also the Our City, Our Vote, which in December of last year was granted for immigrants who are legal permanent residents and who have work authorizations to be able to vote in local election and city council elections. And actually tomorrow, there is the first hearing in Staten Island on this very issue, on whether or not this is constitutional under the New York State Constitution.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, this is very exciting. This is groundbreaking. You know, we do know that there are other cities in the United States where immigrants, legal permanent residents are able to participate in elections. Usually it's like school board elections or smaller elections. This would be the largest version of its kind in the country, right? If this gets the stamp of approval.
Anything in New York City is always like the largest,
yes,
right?
Yes,
you remember
absolutely.
New York City did this during school board elections in the late 90s, right? Early 90s,
Yes.
late 90s. But I mean, I think the one thing folks should pay attention to, aside from the fact that we're going to redraw the lines, is that now we're going to redraw lines where, you know, beyond, you know, just citizens get to vote and will have an impact. And so these numbers, when Latinos say voting age population, right, and this is total number, it's going to be truer to those numbers that will have the opportunity. Now, reality check, right? Raquel, I know you and I will talk about that till we're blue in the face. If we don't turn out, then it doesn't matter how much population or how dense we are in a district. Our voice won't get heard, and the people that we think would be best as a majority of a community won't be elected. And so, you know, huge shout out to all registered Dems and Republicans. If you have a primary in your election, even if you don't, turn out, right? Democratic primaries are where New York City makes their decisions. Most of our races are not competitive. So general elections, where the national mindset is about general elections in November, the elections in the city of New York are typically won in primaries. And it's so critical that folks turn out for both of those elections, because everyone's saying we just don't turn out. And as a result, we get what we get. So don't get upset.
Absolutely, absolutely. People need to come out. We need to participate. We need to vote. You know, this week, I was talking to my mother, and she's like, "Ay, mija, what's going on? What's happening in the world right now?" And you know, between, you know, what happened in Texas, what happened in Buffalo, what happened recently even in the Dominican Republic, people are really concerned. And the first thing I said to her, "Did you go out and vote?" Because there were primary elections happening in Georgia a week ago. Did you vote? And she's like, "Oh, but no, you need to know there's a connection, right? The guy who's the governor who says, oh, people can open and carry, right? Is that what you want? Or do you want the person who's going to put gun laws in place?" So yes, go out and vote.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Lucia, for joining us today.
Anytime. Have a good one.
All right, great. So, you know, everyone, you know, I just want to repeat again why it's so important. You know, when we decided to start the show, Crítica.NYC, it was really for us to talk about the issues of concern for Latinos, and to really bring in Latino voices to discuss the issues that are impacting us on a day-to-day basis. And, you know, as Lucia just eloquently explained to us, you know, there's so much that goes into our democracy, right? Everything from, you know, how the structure is built in terms of how we vote for our representatives. But, you know, beyond voting for our representatives, you know, there are issues that are impacting us every single day and every single moment. And I just also wanted to take a moment for us to just remember those that we've lost. I know we always bring up issues that are impacting us, but you know, as all of you know, recently there was the mass shootings in Buffalo, New York, and in Texas, Uvalde, Texas, in a school where we lost 21 souls, 19 young people, fourth graders, all Latino, and something really of concern for me and for our country, where we're seeing the numbers of these kind of shootings with AR-15 guns, with assault weapons, rising and rising every single day. Also was the shooting in Buffalo. We also want to take a moment to remember the victims, where the majority of those killed were Black elderly people who were out food shopping, doing their food shopping for the week, and just going on in their day-to-day, and then resulting in their death by a person with an assault weapon. And so, we continue to hear about, the need and the changes for gun laws, for stricter gun laws in our country, something to be done on the federal level. And as many of you know, Governor Hochul just signed bills related to restricting gun laws in New York State. One is increasing the age from 18 to 21 of your ability to be able to purchase a gun. And there have been more stricter prohibitions around the red flag laws in terms of identifying people who should not be purchasing a gun. I also wanted to highlight that we have a study from Everytown for gun safety. Everytown for gun safety focuses specifically on the issue of gun violence in our country. Just excuse me for one moment, everyone. I just have to take care of something really quickly here. Okay, great. And, I just wanted to highlight a few things, because I think, when we talk about this issue of gun violence, there really is so much more to this, right? It's not just the issue of banning assault weapons, right? Of these huge mass shootings that occur in a school or at a concert or at the supermarket. But there's also the day-to-day gun violence that occurs in our streets, right? And we know, and we talk about it all the time with our family and friends, just how we've seen also an increase and an uptick of gun violence in our communities, where we've seen the lives of young people being taken away. A 16-year-old girl in the Bronx was killed after school. An 11-year-old girl was killed also in the Bronx by a stray bullet. So many of these things happen. And I just wanted to highlight that in a study on the impact of gun violence on Latinx communities, they highlighted, they conducted this study last year in 2021. Some of the things that they highlighted is over 4,000 Latinx people die from gun violence in the United States. So almost 4,000 people perish from gun violence. And one of the things I felt was really interesting is in this study, in terms of these gun deaths, over 60% happen through homicide, where a person kills another person. And an interesting point that I did not know, about 36% is from suicide, which is very sad when someone takes their own life. So there is a disproportionate impact of gun violence within the Latino community. We hear these stories coming out from many cities, right? We remember what happened, at Pulse, the club in Florida, where many of the people who were killed in that club were from the LGBTQ community, many of them Puerto Rican, Latinos. We see these issues also happening in places like Chicago. And, we know that we are not the only community that suffers from this. Very much the Black community and the Asian community has also suffered at the hands of this sort of gun violence. And so we just want to make sure that we, highlight this issue, that we really think about, in light of the Second Amendment, which people, always talk about, right, and the Constitution, when that amendment was made, there was no assault weapons at that time. And so we really need to reconsider what it is, this proliferation of guns that we have in this country, in the United States. But also I wanted to highlight, the United States is not the only place that suffers from gun violence. We know that this happens all throughout the world. There's always been a conversation around the proliferation of guns in the world. And most recently, as of today, we heard that the cabinet minister of the Dominican Republic on the environment was killed by a close friend, someone who was very upset with him. His name was Orlando Jorge Mera. Many of our leaders in New York and throughout the diaspora had a very close relationship with Orlando Jorge Mera. Our condolences to his family and to the leaders of the Dominican Republic as we really look at how, the safety of our leadership has to be taken into account, of all of us, right? Of our children, of everyone, and how guns really is permeating every part of society. So, again, I just want to thank everyone, for giving us of your time as we talk about all of these very hard and difficult issues that our communities are grappling with on a day-to-day basis. We want to just encourage all of you again, come out and vote, participate, get to know what's happening in your community, get to know how these issues are impacting the Latino community, because it's only through this education that then we can really talk about, right, really discuss what's happening and be able to then, make decisions accordingly, right? So that we know that we really are doing the best for our communities. Again, thank you so much for your time tonight. I'd like to thank again Lucia Gomez for having joined us tonight and giving us that wonderful presentation on the issue of redistricting. I'd like to thank the Manhattan Neighborhood Network for the support of being able to bring this platform to you on Facebook, on YouTube. I'd like to thank our whole team, Zenaida Mendez, executive producer, who also is receiving a wonderful award from Hometown Media for all the effort she makes to diversify public access TV. Thank you, Zenaida Mendez, for doing that important work. And to our whole team, Freddy Pinto, Carla Robles, and all of you at Manhattan Neighborhood Network, again, thank you and have a great night.